Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Holden, and I lead our work here at techUK on digital identity and AI. And so for the next 40 minutes or so, I'm stalling slightly as we get the chairs up on the stage, we will be looking at generative AI and the future of AI, which I may be biased, but I think is arguably one of the most obviously topical, but also interesting issues of the moment. And to help me unpack some of these opportunities, challenges and next steps, I have a stellar lineup, a stellar panel. So I would like to invite to the stage, in no particular order, Sophie Gray, who's the head of Microsoft Business Solutions Sales and Technical Sales at Microsoft. Daniel Belgrave, who is the Vice President of AI at GSK. I believe we also have someone dialing in as well. Who's that? That's Sarah. So also joining me online, we will have Sarah El-Hanfrey, who's the Head of AI and Machine Learning at Innovate UK. And finally, Tom Wells, who's the Deputy Director of MTech Futures and Projects at the Government Office for Science. Thanks. And hello, Sarah, on the call there as well. We'll shuffle up slightly so we can. There we go. Room for one more.
Can she see everybody?
I think so. Sarah, we seem to have a chair in memory of you. Your physical presence is in some ways here. So yeah. Fantastic. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for joining.
I can't see you. I can hear you, but I'm just speaking to myself.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I will make sure to make sure I mention your name before, to lead you in. So fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot of different topics I'd like to cover over the next 40 minutes. So I'm going to get straight into it. It feels like over the particularly last week or so in the build-up to the AI Safety Summit, there's been a lot of discussion around some of the risks and the challenges associated with emerging AI and particularly sort of generative AI and frontier AI. So I'd like to maybe start the conversation on a bit more of an optimistic note and highlight, if you would mind, maybe Sophie, starting with you, some of the, I guess, more exciting applications of AI, some of the positive examples of AI that you're seeing, within your field, and how that will have a genuinely positive impact.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know we've got individuals on the panel that are expert in the medical space, so I thought I would choose a slightly different example that I was very passionate about. Microsoft actually did a piece of work with Heathrow around illegal wildlife trafficking. And this was a really sort of fantastic use case. It wasn't at the time focused around generative AI, but using traditional AI models. And there's a huge problem around illegal wildlife trafficking. I think $23 billion is the amount of money I think that causes, and it funds a lot of, I guess, organised crime groups and money laundering as well. And actually working with Microsoft and working with a number of other technology vendors and some organisations, I guess, in the wildlife space, we were able to use AI to think about how we could detect where potentially wildlife was being brought into the particular country, into suitcases, whether you could spot whether it's an elephant's tusk, for example, and actually think about actually trying to prevent that from taking place and, of course, arresting the individuals responsible for it. It was a fantastic piece of work. A patent's now actually been put in place for that. Over 7,000 species are at risk of extinction generally as well. So it's an amazing piece of work to think when we think about AI for good, how we can protect wildlife. And also that can now be something that can be adopted by other airports and other technology scanning systems as well. So I think it's just a really nice example of something where we like to say AI is being put to good in a slightly different way.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a fantastic example. Maybe Danielle, if I could come to you, what's your perspective for GSK?
Yes, so at GSK we're using AI and machine learning to impact the different parts of the drug development pipeline. So I think this is really exciting that we can not only improve the drug pipeline, but also this has a direct impact on patients. So the therapeutic areas that we look at are oncology and respiratory and also HIV. And it's really amazing that by 2030, we want to impact 2.5 billion patients that they live healthier outcomes. So some of the examples that we've been looking at in the artificial intelligence and machine learning team at GSK is looking at from the initial stage of drug discovery. So can we identify targets for drug discovery using large language models? Because the RNA and the DNA is like a language in itself. So understanding how can you get better targets for improving the probability of success of drugs, because we know that the probability of success of a drug is quite low, it's 10%. So how can we improve that? And also how can we speed up the process of discovering drugs and getting drugs to patients? At the other end of the pipeline, we've also carried out work in understanding how different drugs or different treatment strategies can affect patients. So one particular example we're looking at is hepatitis B, where we've been able to identify heterogeneity in responses to treatment of one of our drugs in the pipeline, which is bepi. So there are we've identified 5 different subgroups of patients in hepatitis B who have different treatment outcomes. So I think that this is really important to see how we can target treatments better, how we can improve patients' outcomes as well. And it's quite an exciting time to be in AI, and also an exciting time to have impact in health.
Thank you. Another brilliant example there, and a fantastic use case. Maybe Tom, if I could come to you next as well, it'd be great to get your insight into some of the key opportunities from a government office for science perspective.
Well, I mean, as you'd expect, the thing that I'm most excited about probably is that kind of like new paradigm in doing scientific research, and it's such a great point about. The language of life is another language you could apply to large language models. I'm going to steal that. But just any kind of science area where there's larger volumes of data, that's a really exciting area for me. As somebody who kind of went through and had a very brief and abortive career as a scientist before most of this took off, and therefore not really having much background in coding at all, in fact none, I thought I'd go a slightly different direction with this. Just the ability to interact with AI now in natural language is really exciting for me. It's kind of like people who aren't coders being able to approach this and kind of get some of the value from AI. Personally quite excited about that, just because it feels like kind of the number of people that can be involved and get the benefit from this and the applications get much broader until I'm replaced by the next generation of people who just grew up doing coding.
I thought you were so replaced by AI, but we'll come on to that. Brilliant. And Sarah, hopefully you can hear us loud and clear. I'd love to hear from you as well on this. Particularly, I know you've been working a lot this year on the kind of the Bridge AI Innovate UK piece, the fund that's happening. And I'd love to get your insight into how startups are engaging with this sort of new arm of UK government to experiment with the new technologies and drive forward sort of research and innovation.
Yeah, and I think, just echoing what Tom said, there's been a lot of focus on the large language models and the generative AI. And I think from a purely technical perspective, it's hard not to be excited by the developments that we've seen in those areas. But yeah, building on Sophie's example, generative AI is just one approach, and like other tools and technologies, it's finding the right problem and the right tool for the right problem. So I think some of the things that we've seen, to example of something that's being funded through the Bridge Part, we'll talk on through this session. We funded Tapita, which is a sustainable fashion brand in Kingston upon Thames, and so they're developing AI-enabled semi-automated textiles recycling framework. So really using AI to identify the composition of fabric that it's labelled in the clothes that we buy, but also kind of trying to identify those undesired features, such as the clothing like zippers and buttons, which actually makes the recycling process challenging, textiles recycling process challenging. So Capita are really seeking to kind of demonstrate the potential of being able to handle up to about 10 tons of used clothing each week, which for me is hugely exciting when we think of actually the potential that could bring for the environmental impact of the fashion industry. So reusing and recycling textiles, minimising resource depletion, water depletion, greenhouse gas emissions. So huge environment, but also really exciting economic opportunities. So how do we have job roles within that textile recycling? And I guess for me at Innovate UK, I'm really lucky because I get to see at that kind of macro level, innovators across the economy working on developing AI, either at that kind of, the new technological developments, but also kind of cutting edge thinking about solutions just in different sectors to really deliver those positive impacts. And so, I feel really privileged in my role to see those entrepreneurs that are really driving AI for good.
Thank you, Sarah. And, again, another brilliant example there. So we're seeing lots of really exciting examples across lots of different markets and sectors. So I think we're sold that there are benefits, there are opportunities that come with this technology. But now I'd like to move on to maybe a bit more of a discussion around how this technology is adopted in both a responsible but also an ethical way as well. So maybe, Danielle, if I could come back to you. When it comes to the adoption of this technology in the workforce, how has that impacted your workforce and what steps have you taken to do that in a considered fashion?
So at GSK, I think we've been very proactive in having responsible AI and really making sure that this is actually embedded into everything that we do. So as part of the structure of the IML, we do have a VP of responsible AI as well, who roadmaps how do we, and works very closely with the teams to try to understand how do we make sure that we're doing the right thing, that the models we build are robust, reproducible, but also that they are ethical, responsible as well. And that's, I think, having that sort of team integrated into AI/ML makes sure that it's everyone's responsibility, that there's this constant dialogue. Also, across GSK, we have an AI Governance Council as well, which was launched last week. And I think that this is really important for increasing that dialogue, because AI is something that affects not just people working in AI/ML as a department, but it affects all of us, that all of us use AI on a day-to-day basis. We are consumers, and we also adapt to these models as well. So it's really important that we are aware of how we're using technology and that we're using technology responsibly as well. So I think this is something hugely important. As a researcher, it's also an area that I've looked at quite a lot as well. How can we do things in a fair way so that people get the right treatment as well, and that the models we deploy are safe, and also that they are benefiting everybody as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear a bit more about your AI Governance Council. That sounds like a brilliant initiative. So I will be checking that out. Thank you. Sophie, I know at Microsoft there's a lot of discussion, a lot of talk around how we use AI to augment the workforce. And I know you've got sort of various tools that exist, such as Copilot. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how it works and how it helps people?
I think Rishi Sunak the other day used the phrase Copilot. Everyone needs a Copilot. It wasn't necessarily Microsoft Copilots. There are lots of Copilots, but we were like plug for Copilot. I guess what does that really mean? I think people are quite familiar with the concept of a virtual assistant such as Siri or Cortana, or we've got Alexas maybe in our home as well. But if we think about that in the workplace, actually, Copilot is something that essentially can work side by side with you to help you become more productive. And if we actually look at, I guess, leaders, what leaders want to get from AI and what employees want to get from AI, they want to be more productive, they want to have more job satisfaction, and they want to have better health and well-being. And actually, by making us more productive and enjoying our jobs more, essentially our well-being gets better. So when we think about Copilots, whatever application we're in, whether that be part of the Microsoft Office suite, whether it may be a low-code platform, maybe it might be your finance and operations system, your customer service solution, having essentially this panel that sits alongside you as that more business assistant gives you an opportunity to prompt you into things that could save you time, such as I could write that email for you. What type of response would you like? And you can say, I'd like a friendly response, or I'd like a really nasty response, whatever it would be. And essentially it will go ahead and actually create content for you, because generative AI, as we know, the difference here is the ability to create content compared to other forms of artificial intelligence. So that's what essentially Copilot is. I think of it as I've got my one hand on sort of my mouse, and my left hand is probably my Copilot working, side by side with me. And whenever we're prompted to say, what do you think about this? Can I summarise that meeting for you? Here's the actions that I took. All of that capability is essentially built into Copilot. So we're very passionate about the human still being a really key part of the workforce and being, part of processes and tasks. And so Copilot has been a really, I think, a more kind of safe and responsible way to think about how we can infuse AI in the day-to-day work place but doing it in a way, like we said, that focuses on productivity gains. So,
Yeah.
and if you haven't used it, I'd recommend going and taking a look, because it's, you know, it's fun as well.
There we go. I can save you a lot of time. Absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to now come on to just talk about sort of AI adoption sort of more generally. So, Tom, I may come back to you, and then Sarah, you're next, just queuing you up, which is we definitely recognise at techUK that there is a long tail of companies, British enterprises, that are really sort of falling behind and really just don't know where to begin when it comes to sort of testing out what AI could do for them and their organisations. And so I think there's further work that needs to happen to support those organisations to be able to identify how this technology could potentially be used by them and their organisations. Do you have any practical steps or kind of tips, I guess, for those sorts of companies that are maybe sort of considering dabbling with AI, and if so, where to begin, how to start?
I mean, the Government Office for Science is a small organisation within government, right? So in some ways we are kind of an SME.
Yeah.
Danielle talked about kind of reproducibility, and I think that kind of rigour kind of to approach some of this is going to be really important. We're obviously in a period of hype or period of kind of rapid change, and people will be experimenting with it. I was really struck by the work. I mean, careful, it's a preprint, not peer reviewed, but the work that kind of came out in the Harvard Business Review and Boston Consulting that looked at the kind of the range of tasks that could be kind of essentially improved with a co-pilot, and some relatively dramatic kind of 15-20% improvements in quality and kind of productivity on some tasks. But the bit that really stood out for me in that study, and it'd be really interesting to see how well reproduced this is over other things, is for the task that was specifically chosen to be beyond the capability of the large language model they were using as a kind of co-pilot, people did 25% worse. I think it's 25%.
Interesting.
And that is just, I think it is, so I guess the one tip would be know the difference, like know what these things are good at and capable of, know their limitations really, really carefully, and that's going to be a kind of shifting frontier. I think it's the way they described it in the review, and just be really, really clear-sighted about that, because I think a co-pilot, great, but a co-pilot that you rely on uncritically without thinking about what it can't help you with could lead you down some really dangerous paths when there are things like bias that we know are kind of built into it, when there are some real kind of blind spots or kind of errors that can come from it. So I think the danger for a small organisation is that kind of uncritical jump in bit. That's what kind of keeps me awake.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting point as well, actually, because some of the questions I often get is, but what happens if we don't have good data or good documents to start the co-pilot working from? And I think actually the fundamentals that we've known in terms of having a good data strategy and a good approach to that and thinking about our data quality and governance, when we think about what we're doing here, all of these things still apply. Do you see what I mean? Getting that foundation, exactly to your point, to make sure that we're using the best quality data to have the best outcome. So I don't think any organisation's perfect with that, but it's a question definitely I get asked a lot, and I think those fundamentals still remain so important, and more important ever, now than ever, I think, as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Sarah, I'd like to bring you in on this. Obviously, I know you're doing a lot of work, particularly with sort of startups that are maybe grappling with exactly this issue. What are kind of the tips and tricks you kind of suggest to people who are embarking on this AI adoption journey?
Yeah, I mean, very supportive of kind of the comments that have already been made. I think, Innovate UK's got a long history in investing in AI innovation. But very much to your point, Catherine, I don't think we're seeing necessarily reaping the full benefits of AI, either economic or societal, despite that fantastically vibrant AI ecosystem that the UK has. And for companies, that there's a number of different barriers, everything from the data foundations we've been discussing, skills gaps, uncertain returns on investment. And that really came from, which was launched earlier this year. So that's a £100 million programme to drive and competitiveness in the UK economy through the adoption of AI. In the programme, we're targeting 4 specific sectors. So we're targeting agri-food, construction, creative industries, and transport. including logistics and warehouse. Holistic program designed to kind of address a number of the things that have already been talked about. I think, funding is one aspect, so developing those new and trusted AI services that be co-created by demand and supply for specific sectors is one part, but really, a lot of it is actually how do businesses kind of increase their capabilities. Such a critical lens and knowing like how you even start, I think, for some businesses. I guess what we see is that actually lots of people are in different stages of their journey. Some people really need that demystification process of AI generally, whereas others, it might be that actually you have a number of AI proof of concepts, but you don't really know how you kind of integrate that within your organization through to people who need, much more advanced scientific expertise. And so that's the program is very much a holistic program designed to kind of provide everything from funding to some of those businesses' supports through our strategic delivery partners. So we're working with the Alan Turing Institute, Digital Catapult, the Hartree Centre, and the Knowledge Transfer Network, Innovate UK Knowledge Transfer Network. So I have to do a quick plug. It's bridgeai.net. So if anyone is interested in finding more about the offerings that are available, they'll be there.
Fantastic. And is that opportunity still open right now? That's a live opportunity for people?
Yes, so there's a range of different funding calls. So we have one open that probably it has just closed, but there'll be more funding, and there's plenty of business support accelerator programs throughout the coming years.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, definitely one to check out. And there are a lot of sort of those free and open resources out there. You just need to know where to go. So techUK can definitely help with that sort of signposting. The one I often suggest for a lot of our smaller members is the Digital Catapult's AI garage. That's a really good tool for helping you just identify some of the key questions you should be asking when embarking on that AI adoption journey and starting small and iterating. And as we always say, AI could be part of the solution, but first of all, it's very much looking at what is the challenge you're trying to solve. It may just be straight up data analytics that could be the answer to your problem, but it's also worth dabbling to see what's possible when it comes to AI solutions. I'd now like to pivot for a moment, Tom, to talk a little bit about, I know you've been doing some research looking at the impact of AI more broadly on kind of the UK society and the economy. It sounds like it's a little bit more future focused, but I would love to just unpack that slightly, and if you could share maybe with the audience some of your findings, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So in advance of the summit, we published a discussion paper that included some scenarios for 2030 about what the frontier of AI might look like, and some of the kind of policy questions that kind of flow from that. We'll have a longer form version of that coming out soon. But we published it partly to inform Objective 1 of the summit, shared understanding of the risk. So there is a bit of a risk focus to the paper that we've put out. We said in it, we'd love to hear from people about what we've missed, kind of what we've got wrong. It is a genuinely uncertain area. One of the big uncertainties is what does frontier AI become capable of on that kind of timescale. In fact, actually, experts can't even really agree what frontier AI is capable of now. So what it might become capable of in 2030 is clearly uncertain. Yeah. But I think if there's one big thing that I've taken so far from the work that we've done, talking to lots of different experts in different parts of AI, it's that kind of the capability of these kind of frontier systems is not the only big source of uncertainty. There's a lot of other things that kind of wrap around that kind of gives us a really broad range of futures. So what's the geopolitical context that AI is being deployed in 2030? It feels really different if you've got kind of high levels of global cooperation flowing out of the series of AI summits in the early part of this decade. It feels compared to if you've got quite low levels of geopolitical cooperation on how we manage AI, these models aren't going to respect borders, right? So there is questions around how much progress we make on safety, of course, that's there. But there's also questions around kind of the level of distribution of use, right? And you're seeing some of this starting to play out. It came up a lot in the summit, that kind of question of open and closed models, who has access to them, who has access to the weights versus the kind of the, just as a user. I think these things are going to play out, and actually how that does over the next decade is going to make a big difference to both the opportunities in AI and some of the risks that it poses.
Yeah, and it's all still to play for, isn't it, really? Exactly the trajectory of where that's heading at the moment is slightly uncertain and is in, the realms of us being able to sort of, I guess, adapt that and steer that in the right direction to the right course. Thank you, that's very helpful. Where can people find that research, that paper?
So we published it, it's on gov.uk. If you search, I think, AI Safety Summit discussion papers, our one was called Annex A.
Okay, check out Annex A. It's a catchy title, I love it. Fantastic, thank you. And obviously the AI Safety Summit, I'm sure took up a lot of time for people in the room last week. It was obviously the first global AI Safety Summit that took place on the 1st and 2nd of November in Bletchley Park. I'd love to get maybe, Danielle, starting with you. Did you have any kind of particular key takeaways or reflections from how that event went? And any thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
So I thought the AI Summit was an amazing opportunity to bring together a global community. So there were people from all over the world. And that for me was really amazing to see this proactive dialogue into what is the future landscape of AI and how does it impact our lives. Of course, one of the key things that came up in that discussion was around the area of regulation of AI. But I think the approach of being pro-innovation is super important. I think especially in a lot of the applications we've been talking about, we want to be able to be in a space where we can innovate with agility as well, but at the same time putting the right safeguards to manage risk. So the call of the government to have this pro-innovation approach is super important, with the right safeguards, managing risk, but also having centralized regulation based on use cases. So the pharmaceutical industry is quite regulated already. So we already have things like the Food and Drug Administration and the equivalent in Europe and the UK as well. And I think that it's really important that similarly we have regulation that's based on the industry, on the use case as well, so that we manage risk of particular industries, and also thinking of regulation in terms of, for example, in pharma, there are certain parts of the pipeline that you may not want to regulate. For example, drug discovery or identifying targets, all the areas of scientific discovery. There's a balance in how do we improve innovation while regulating in this space, which is very different when we're actually deploying drugs using AI to deploy drugs to patients. So the balance in looking at regulation in terms of different parts of the pipeline in different industries, I think these are things to be taken into account as well.
Absolutely. And you're already working in a highly regulated sector as it is. So we need to make sure that any further regulation that happens in that space isn't duplicative, it's not overlapping with existing regulation.
Exactly.
That would be detrimental for innovation. So thank you, that's very helpful. And Sophie, I'd really like to get your thoughts on AI Safety Summit last week, your thoughts, reflections. Obviously, a lot of the focus was on those more existential long-term risks. And I guess one of the criticisms or I guess discussions that came out of that was, are we doing enough to balance some of the more immediate short-term risks whilst also trying to grapple with some of those longer-term ones as well? So do you think they kind of struck the balance right there?
Yeah, I think it was firstly I was disappointed I didn't get an invite. That was my first reflection. But how amazing I think that out of the UK, I think that this was hosted, and to your point, we had a number of global leaders there, and actually the recognition that we need to work together collaboratively. And if I think about Microsoft as a technology vendor, one of the things that stood out for me was to hear the further work that we will now do to think about, frontier models and the Frontier Model Forum that has been put together. Yes. So essentially, to your point about future risk, frontier models being those of us in the room that aren't, I guess, necessarily as familiar with them, where a future AI large language models may essentially outperform some of the most advanced AI models that there are today. And so I thought what was fantastic is to hear the commitment of, Microsoft working in partnership with Google, with Anthropic, with OpenAI, and we'll see more, I think, organisations probably join in partnership there to help actually understand how we can share best practice how we can share knowledge and insights, how we can think about, AI safety, and also, as technology vendors, but do that collaboratively. So essentially, we are thinking well in advance of what may happen and agreeing collectively how that could look and feel in the future impact of that. So for me, I think that was really, really exciting because certainly I know within our organisation, we, very similar to what I've heard at GSK, we have a fantastic governance council that's called our Ether Committee, that goes right across our engineering organisation, right through to individuals like me that are responsible AI champions in the field. It's a very diverse community. But actually, what are other organisations doing, and how can we share how they could be doing those things, and learning from each other what works the best, ultimately. So, right through an organisation. So I think that's the Frontier Models kind of forum, and the advancements of that, I think, really stood out for me. Yeah. And I was hugely excited by, I think, the commitment to collaborate generally.
Yeah, a really positive outcome for the summit, for sure. Thank you. And Sarah, I'd love to come to you on this question as well. Obviously, particularly with the AI Safety Summit, it's generated such an amount of interest in AI and the future of AI. How do we build on this momentum, and what do you think should be the key next steps kind of going forward?
It was great to have that focus of attention on risks of frontier AI. It's an area that UKRI, has been doing a lot of work in for a number of years, and has a key role in really kind of directing focus and incentivising behaviours, both for the research community, but also for the innovators that we fund. I had a very poorly timed holiday, so there were lots of exciting announcements that were coming out that I was trying to keep up with. And I think, it's such a positive to see that clear global commitment to this space with, the declaration, but also the future summits, as well as some of the, those key announcements. So the £100 million AI for healthcare announcement, but also the AI Safety Institute. I think, obviously we need to kind of wait for further announcements of how those come online. But I think we saw such a strong commitment both to the AI sector, but also AI for good. So I think, there's lots of further announcements that will need to come off the back of that. But I think the incentive and the direction was very clear, and we're very supportive of that.
Yeah, and I'd love to open that question up to those in the room as well. How do we build on the momentum of this? What do you anticipate, or what do you believe should be the next step, maybe particularly for government? Anyone want to come in on that? I know, a bit difficult when you are government.
Well, maybe just to pick out one other thing that I think was announced at the summit, and I think is a really helpful next step. I talked about all the range of uncertainty. We can't agree quite what models can do or not at the minute. The work that Yoshua Bengio is now announced to kind of lead on the kind of state of the science, kind of building that kind of consensus picture of what can these models do, what are the risks, what are the opportunities. I think that is a really, really useful next step, as somebody who spent some time inside government trying to think about that and try and understand where there was consensus or where there wasn't. I would love to be a customer of that, I guess, in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important. One thing that was highlighted, having more collaboration within sectors and across sectors as well, to come up with principles of responsible AI. And I think that having these working groups is really important to see how we are proactive in shaping the field and entering the dialogue of how do we improve practice in improving models and thinking of deployment of models as well.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things, actually, I sit on the Data for London board, which is focused on building the new Data for London platform, which is really exciting. And, a big part of that initiative is thinking about how we get public and private sector organisations sharing. But also there has been such a huge focus around responsible AI and generative AI. And I actually think the commitment and the broader, like we say, the AI Safety Institute, etc., where we can take learnings and fuse that, I think it's going to really help, missions and like that, so I think accelerate ultimately. So I'm very excited to see what will come in generally for government for missions like that. So
Excellent. Right, well, I know we've covered quite a lot over the last 40 minutes. I think we've touched on opportunities, some of the risks, the challenges, next steps, and various different policy initiatives happening in this space. So maybe just to round things off, and Sarah, I'll start with you and then maybe go down the line. I'd love to get, particularly for the audience, what's your kind of your final key message that you'd like to leave with the audience? What's the one takeaway you think you'd like to leave people with following this session?
So I think it's clear, AI has huge potential, huge transformative power. So I guess, for companies, there is support out there. There's lots of, either that's if the Bridge AI program is relevant, but if not, from Innovate UK, from UK AI, there's the Responsible AI UK multidisciplinary network, which is all about kind of convening researchers, industry professionals, policymakers. So across UKRI, there's lots of initiatives in this space. So I think, if you're looking for support or funding, please do reach out to us. We can help you, signpost you to kind of relevant funding that may be suitable, or just support. It doesn't have to be funding; it can be business support as well, to really kind of help make this technology accessible and to either start kind of your adoption journey or actually innovating and researching with these technologies.
Thank you, Sarah. Danielle?
Yeah, I think forums like this are really important for highlighting what are the opportunities and also celebrating the current successes in AI and machine learning as well. And I'm really excited about the impact we can have on health and the life sciences, and just understanding the building blocks of life, but also understanding how we can have impact in patients in the future as well. And this is something that's hugely exciting. But one thing that I think we need to do as well is focus on education of AI tools for the future generation as well. So one thing I'm really excited about in the past 5 years, there's been a lot of focus on the curriculum as well, how we're doing computer science in schools, and really thinking of how do we shape the next generation in taking AI forward as well. So I think this is really important if we can think about how do we all become collaborators in improving health outcomes, improving the world, improving society as well, but doing that responsibly and educating that from very young as well.
Thank you, Danielle. Tom?
I think it's that kind of call for bringing a bit of kind of scientific rigor to a lot of this, whether that's the vendors of the model, the users of it, the kind of the adoption of it in companies, really thinking clearly in a kind of rigorous, repeatable way or reproducible way about kind of what can they do, kind of what are they used for, what are the drawbacks, where are the errors still coming from, where are the biases, so that kind of that isn't just a kind of, I guess, a more or kind of casual approach to trying things out and kind of really bringing that kind of rigor to it. I think
Good point. Sophie?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think most projects that I see fail, and not to be negative around AI, are where they're led as a technology project. Mm-hmm. And I think there's people, there's process and technology. That's any typical framework for any transformation program. And I think for me, an AI people is the one with the capital P in this scenario. And to your point around skills, readiness, there is so much free readiness and training. Microsoft has its own initiative to train 1 million people on AI. I have my own AI training within Microsoft, even though I work for Microsoft. It's a part of our core curriculum. So I think treat this as a business change program generally. It's got to be a company-wide strategy. And the people are really fundamental within that. The technology is there and the technology will happen. So. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Sophie, to Tom, to Danielle and to Sarah. Thank you for joining us online. Brilliant discussion, and obviously more to be had in this space. I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing discussion for many weeks, months and years, I'm sure. So I'd like to now hand over to Microsoft for a fireside chat on low-code tech and AI. And so to kick off that session, I'd like to welcome to the stage Adam Steele. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.